during the time that we're trying to navigate here, the COVID crisis. And on that note, this is why we're hosting this particular session. This is our second session. I'm happy to be co-hosting this with my good friend and partner, Doug Rawady from Sandler Peak Training. And one of the things we've been trying to do at the Business Council and our chambers is leveraging our network of business professionals like Ann Diamond and Doug Wade and others, and get them in front of our business community. There's a lot of questions on how to leverage your business, how to navigate your business, and how to position yourself for what seems to be the new normal with related to how our economy is headed and how we're all adjusting and addressing the issues of the COVID-19 crisis. It's been an interesting few months for sure. So these events are put on through our partners, and I'd like to acknowledge UI, Southern Connecticut Gas, and the Avangrid family. Without their support, it's difficult to put these sessions on top of all the other things that we do. So we do want to acknowledge them and thank them for their continued support, as well as our guests today. We've got two great guests, both board members of the Bridgeport Regional Business Council, and I'm just thrilled to have both of them on the call today and get them in front of you folks. So for no further ado here, I'll like to make an introduction to our guests. First, we have Ann Diamond, who is the president of Bridgeport Hospital and executive vice president at Yale New Haven Health System. Ann has a wealth of experience in healthcare. She has been CEO of two other organizations, UConn Health's John Dempsey Hospital and the Day Kimball Healthcare. Ann has focused her work on improving hospital operations through quality and financial improvements, shared governance, staff engagement, and process improvement. She has been in healthcare for over 30 years and held many positions in her career, starting as a nuclear medicine technologist, radiation safety officer, all the way through to her prior roles in CEO roles, and then coming here to Bridgeport Hospital. She earned her undergraduate degree in nuclear medicine technology from Cedar Crest College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and is a graduate of Purdue University Global, the School of Law. So welcome today, Ann. It's a pleasure to have you on with us.
Thanks so much, Dan. Great to be here.
Now I'd like to introduce someone who I think we're all familiar with at some level or another. We like to call the milkman, Mr. Douglas Wade Jr., from Fairfield, Connecticut, and a graduate of Sacred Heart University with a degree in business management. He became a jack of all trades, working alongside parents, his uncles, cousins, and siblings at Wade's Dairy. It's a family business started in 1893 by his great-grandfather, Frank Henry Wade. Doug obtained a milk pasteurizing license, a license to drive tractor trailers, headed the sales department, handled the IT needs of the business, and is now the fourth generation president of Wade's Dairy. His son, Andrew, and nieces, Lindsay and Tori, now work alongside him in the business and intend to carry on the Wade's legacy as the fifth generation. Doug's ongoing community efforts include his service on boards, several boards in the community, including the Bridgeport Regional Business Council, as I mentioned, the Council of Churches of Greater Bridgeport, the Fairfield Half Marathon, and the Juneteenth celebration. He actively supports the St. Vincent Swim Across the Sound Foundation and Alpha Community Services. Doug also publicly advocates for the most in need and strongly promotes efforts to reduce poverty, provide quality education, and restore this country to the land of opportunity. Doug is an active bicyclist and rides each year in the Connecticut Challenge to raise funds for cancer survivors. And he's happily married to Ramona, and they reside in Shelton, Connecticut. So welcome, Doug. I'm glad to have you on, and both Ann and Doug are awesome supporters of the Business Council and our chamber. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Doug Rawady, who's going to be moderating this session and working us through over the next hour here with questions for Ann and Doug. And I'd just like to introduce Doug as well. He has 35 years of B2B and B2C sales, marketing, management, and customer service experience. Doug is able to objectively assess an organization's problems and deficiencies and typically comes up with one or more turnkey solutions that meet those issues head on. His uncommon mix of talents and competencies give Doug a unique perspective and advantage that other coaches and consultants often lack. And his focus on an integrated best practice solution strategy is what truly sets him apart from the pack. He is a certified instructor at Sandler Peak, as I mentioned, and been a great partner to us as we have been working together to help the business community navigate this current situation that we're in. So with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Doug. Thank you everyone for joining us again, and we'll look forward to a really dynamic conversation this morning.
Thank you, Dan, for that very kind introduction, and also a pleasure having both of these luminaries, these local business luminaries, on here. I'm hoping we got one Doug with a got milk hat on over there, so that's going to have to be the differentiator here, as the name Doug pops up in our conversation. So, for those of you who may have attended our first session here, which was, God, it was 4 months ago. It's kind of hard to believe it's been that much time since we ran version 1 of Lessons in Leadership. But the way we do this is we've got a laundry list of questions that we kind of worked together ahead of time before we sat down, because we thought that they would be relevant to those of you who are here now as attendees, just regardless of what your business are. We want to make sure that the information that's discussed here today is going to be meaningful to all of you. So we probably won't get through all of them, but at the same time, if any of you out there have questions, I think you have the ability to put them in the chat window. And if we run out of questions before we run out of time, we will certainly address those. We're also going to you may notice me looking down, I'm going to be trying to capture talking points that both of these folks introduced through the conversation. And we'll put together a summary that we can send out to you after the fact, that it'll just kind of, obviously when you're watching this again at some point down the road, you may want to refer to those. So with that in mind, as usual, we did a virtual coin toss before the program. And Ann very kindly offered to receive the first question. So I'm going to say, and I'm going to use the word customers occasionally throughout this, and recognizing that Bridgeport Hospital is dealing with patients in many cases, but nonetheless, they are your customers. So just for those of you out there in Zoom land, just keep in mind that customers is kind of a very broad term that we're going to use here that apply to both of these folks' business. So to begin with, how have your respective businesses, would you say, been most impacted to date by the pandemic? And how have you had to pivot just, to meet these challenges head on? And you can kind of start this, and then we'll go to Doug second.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say that really for us, March 14th was a turning point for our business. That was the admission of our first COVID positive patient. And, prior to that, we did a lot of surge planning. We had to retrofit our physical space where our environment of care, where we care for our patients. And really at our peak, when we had 226 COVID patients, we had 274 non-COVID patients in our hospital. And so for us, it was really creating new systems, new process, new flow to be able to segregate and manage the two patient populations separately, and make sure that they got the very best care possible. And in order to do that, we really needed to cross-train. So doctors that have not stepped foot in a hospital, probably since their residency or fellowship, had to be trained on how to care for patients in the hospital. So we really shut down all of our ambulatory care facilities for the most part, and really had to change just our whole business model. We had to open up new venues such as testing tents. We actually erected a mobile field hospital right here in the parking lot behind me, and we did that all ourselves without the help from the state or the federal government. So it was really putting leaders into roles through an incident command structure to be able to manage the planning and the response here at Bridgeport Hospital. And now we're in that recovery and transformation phase, and we're finding that there's a lot of things that we implemented really we're very positive, and we're not going back to business as it was.
Great. Super. Thank you. Mr. Wade, other Doug?
My Black Day was Black Friday, the 13th of March, and because on Thursday we were still serving about 113 public school systems, and on Friday we had 0, and we had 8,000 cases of school milk half pints that doesn't have any other home that we were staring at, either in the pipeline being produced at our dairy or, on our trucks. And it was kind of a nightmare scenario and a little frightening. And within a matter of days, all of our diners, our caterers, our restaurants were all closing down. And we were looking at Pandora's box. We had 50% of our sales were ceasing. But the phone started ringing for stores that couldn't get an adequate supply of milk. And we had plenty of employees that were still gung-ho to be working. So we put them to work. We're running specials of water all over the place, picking up product in upstate New York and Pennsylvania. And we just found ways to be creative through this pandemic, and we stayed busy. And the phones were ringing about customers looking for home delivery service. Do you do this? And I said, no, we did it up until 28 years ago. We did it for 100 years. But when that phone rings often enough, you say, boy, could this be a viable business for us to get into again? And sure enough, April 16th, we started making deliveries to homes again, and we signed up 300 and some odd customers, and the nostalgia factor for home delivery was off the charts. We got interviewed by radio stations, Channel 12 News, the Wall Street Journal, CNN did a national story on us. It was just amazing, all of the publicity. And the BRBC recognized this as a big pivot movement for Wade's Dairy, and it was just off the charts. So we just stayed very positive through this. We were able to maintain most of our employees through this whole crisis. The emergency feeding programs for the schools that kicked in made up for some of the school milk volume that we had lost. So we're surviving through this.
That's awesome. This is a little bit sort of related to the question because both of you brought this up and I thought it was interesting. It sounds like your ability and willingness, of course, is a big part of this, to, and the word pivot has been just, probably overused these last couple of months, but to be able to recognize where you needed to repurpose human capital or intellectual capital in order to meet the need that maybe you didn't even know was there. But you both kind of saw that and sprung into action pretty quickly, it sounds like. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Likewise.
I would agree. I think Doug used two words that really summarize, the whole leadership during this time, and that was creativity and positivity. I heard that from Doug, and that certainly was here at Bridgeport Hospital also. You have to think creatively. The way business was pre-March may look very different going forward.
Yeah. Good. So in keeping with the sort of like the relationship with employees and customers, again, using that term fairly broadly, and I'm going to say this is kind of a two-part thing regarding employees. So how are you, both of you, managing to maintain, or have you been managing to maintain employee morale? Because I got to believe there have been times throughout this one that may have been important to stay on top of. And how are you communicating? What's been your most effective way to communicate whatever messaging you want regarding morale or policy or otherwise to employees while all this has been going on? Ann?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We spent a lot of time as a senior leadership team ensuring that we were, really trying to address the needs of our staff and our medical staff. And so we turned to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You start with the personal needs, the physical needs. And what we found that in the darkest days of the pandemic here in Bridgeport, we could have nurses and doctors coming for a 12-hour shift starting at 7 in the morning and ending at 7 at night. There weren't grocery stores open at those hours before or after, which is why, Doug's home delivery was so important to our community. So, our employees really just wanted to feel like they had the basics. So we set up a grocery right here at the hospital that they could order online through Sodexo, which is our food service partner. Just basic things, milk, bread, butter, eggs, etc., so they could feel like they had some food. Laundry services, the nurses said, I'm here, I'm working, and I love my job, but I just want to feel clean when I go home. I don't want to take anything, that I may have got on my clothes home with me. So we established laundry services, childcare. There was no school anymore. So, working moms and dads, what are they to do? And a lot of the childcare centers that are out there closed. Lodging, again, many doctors and nurses that said, I have no problem. This is the profession that I've chosen, but my husband, my wife, my child are all high risk, so I can't go home. So we provided lodging, for our staff. Then we started trying to move towards prioritizing wellness, that safety and belonging. Spiritual care, we have an amazing spiritual care department that's, really from all different faiths represented. And they were there not only for our patients, but for our staff. We created something called Battle Buddies. So you had at least one person that checked in with you every single day. And I even had a battle buddy. I modeled that. My battle buddy was the president at Greenwich Hospital and Lawrence and Memorial Hospital. So we were talking multiple times a day, checking in and making sure that we're doing all right. And then the employee and the family resources. And then last but not least was increasing joy. And we did a lot of fun things, and thank you to all of you out there that donated food and other things to Bridgeport Hospital, because it really did increase the joy for our employees. We drank and we ate well, there's no doubt about it, but we did other fun things. So all of our therapy dogs, we did a pet parade. Who doesn't smile when you see a bunch of really cute dogs going by? Military flyovers, and a big shout out to all our police, fire, EMS. They did all kinds of heroes parades, and that really went a long way. But I think one of the most basic things was just communicating that we had their back, that we had the right personal protective equipment. We shared that on a daily basis, dashboards, so they knew exactly what we had, and that if we were running short, we talked about it. And so just that communication through emails and town halls, answering questions that come through the Q&A and the chat real time, rounding, and just being present and listening to the staff, I think made all the difference for us here at Bridgeport.
Bravo, that's great. Doug, any similarities, differences? How were you handling it with your folks during this time?
I see most all of my employees on a daily basis, and we consider them to be part of the Wade family, and we care, and we wanted them to understand everything that was going on. My drivers, first line responders, they're out there going into all these stores, into restaurants, into convalescent homes, hospitals, making deliveries. We had to do a lot of communication with them so that they had masks, so they had gloves, so that they were following all the protocols that were rapidly coming out. So we used quite a bit of email communications with our employees. We always tried to show them how much we cared, because we did. If somebody came down sick in our company, it could have shut us down, so we took all the necessary precautions. We sent some people to work from home. We social distance. We have people sanitizing on a regular basis. But just, showing that empathy, that concern for our employees, because they've always shown it for us, and it's a two-way street, and they give me their all, and we wanted to show the same thing. We provided gift certificates for restaurants to all our employees. We brought in food trucks a couple of times, put up some banners, showing our appreciation for all our employees. We're a family business, just good values, and everybody pulled together. It's been quite an experience, one that I don't want to go through again, but the sense of community we have and caring is you know, that's why Wade's has been around 127 years.
That's great. Would it
If I could just follow up on something
please.
that Doug said, again, you know, Bridgeport and Yale New Haven Health may be the largest health system in the state, but it does feel like a family here also. And, you know, I think we are unique, not only within the state, but I think nationally, where we didn't have any layoffs. We didn't lay off, we didn't furlough, and we actually gave a hero's bonus to our staff that worked during this time. So, you know, very similar to Wade's, you know, we view our staff, our nurses, our doctors, pharmacists, x-ray techs, everyone that really works here as part of the family. And I think that is a big differentiator in companies in general.
That's great insight. Would it be fair to say, because one of the things a thread that I heard both of you say, at least I came through, is the level of bonding that you have with these people who you largely look at as being family, extensions of your own family. It sounds like it may have been strong to begin with, but this has been an opportunity to make it, you know, even more, you know, more strong. If that's right. Would that be a good kind of good way to look at it?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I was in a unique position. Unlike Doug, I just started here at Bridgeport right around Thanksgiving. So I was still really out there trying to meet everybody. I'm sure Doug knows every single employee that works for him. So it was a little bit more challenging to really try and get to know people when it's hard to get around. You've got masks and gloves and everything on. And I really think that Zoom is just an amazing, amazing platform, because you can see the people's face, you can hear them, they can ask questions, it's interactive. And I really credit having these kinds of technologies as being part of the success for us.
Good point.
To talk about being thrown into the fire, and you know, we had just met, I think, personally, you know, in person, just a few weeks before
Right.
the crisis hit, and you know, we were talking about all the stuff we're going to do this year and what we have lined up, and it all kind of went away virtually overnight, and we all had to shift gears a little bit. So
Different priorities, certainly.
I really commend you for navigating that transition. And really, you know, really two hot things coming at you at once, you know, a new role and this crisis. So very impressive. Doug, I'm sorry I cut you off there.
That's all right. We've got a new upcoming challenge now because we have schools reopening, and we have no idea how they're going to be reopening. Our order is going to be a whole lot different, you know, on school milk. And we also have some employees that don't have childcare arrangements without schools fully reopening. So we're taking our conference room and planning on turning that into a daycare center so that some of our employees can, you know, bring their children to work here so that we can keep everyone employed. But it's a new world, you know, and you just got to be creative in your thought process. And this was an idea that my sister generated, Susan. She's retired, but still working from home and, you know, helping out wherever she can.
Well, so this is interesting. So I want to kind of take this subject and pivot, you know, again, using that word, overusing it, to the relationship that with your customers, again, patients, in your case, Doug, the end users, the retail stores, the schools, and so on. What, if anything, have you done shifted in terms of the communications, and how have you had to change those in reference to the relationships with your customers? Because they're still out there, aren't they? I mean, you still do need to serve them in some fashion, maybe even at a higher level than you've been accustomed to doing. What's been the approach there, Ann?
Yeah, so, you know, we had 3 big challenges for us, you know, as we go into recovery and transformation. And the first one is community confidence. You know, throughout the last, 4 or 5 months, we've been saying, stay home. Even if you think you might have COVID, stay home, call this number, call your doctor, do a virtual visit. And now we're changing the message on them, and we're saying, okay, it's safe to come in. And it is safe to come back for care. And what we've seen, a lot of patients that have put off really, I wouldn't say emergent, but certainly urgent care. And now they're coming back sicker than they would have been, you know, a few months ago. And so it's really getting patients to feel comfortable to come back into a patient care setting and feel safe. We have to be able to address that safety issue. And very similar to what Doug talked about, we have changed our patient flow process. I was joking before we started, we have a project right now to eliminate waiting rooms. We don't want you to wait anymore. We want you to go directly to your point of care. And that requires some very challenging new processes. And we're looking at ways to communicate. The telemedicine was something that was there before COVID, but is now really far more prevalent. And the challenge is, will the insurance companies continue to pay for it in the future? We don't know. So, one of the questions was, how are you, taking these changes that you implemented during COVID, these new revenue streams, and what's that going to look like down the road? I don't know, because I don't always control the revenue reimbursement. It's the federal government, it's the insurance companies. So we're going to have to see kind of how that works out. But we're doing things like this. We're doing community forums to answer questions, because the parents out there have a lot of questions and they want to talk to pediatricians and infectious disease physicians around their kids going back to school, playing sports, etc. So you're going to see a lot of those over the next few weeks from Bridgeport Hospital.
That's great. Mr. Wade, you, sir? Other Doug?
A lot of changes in our business model, because we had a lot of customers when everything shut down that had no resources to pay our bills. And of course, we have to pay our milk suppliers and all those people. And things got a little dicey there for a while, but we have to extend as much empathy as we can to our customers. I mean, we were fortunate that we were able to maintain business and keep our employees busy, and we had, sales, but we didn't have the revenue coming in that we needed to pay our bills. So the payroll protection plan was a godsend to help us, and it allowed us to extend more credit to our customer base. All right, and there was an old saying at Stu Leonard's store: the customer's always right, and if he's ever wrong, reread rule number 1. We kind of follow that same model. We try to do right by every customer, no matter how big or small. And it's been a trying period of time, but we're all getting through this, as they say, together.
Doug, was it? It sounds like you have or had some institutional clients, and then you may have had some smaller. I don't want to say smaller, but retail, perhaps, versus. Has the communication been much the same for both of those types of entities, or have you had to shift it or adjust it accordingly?
Well, you certainly. Being out of home delivery for 28 years, we had to really shift gears to get back into that. And we didn't do it in the traditional model of the porch box on the back step. We're calling the customer 5 minutes before we arrive and, asking them not to come outside to greet the driver. The driver will go up and just place a case of milk. And nowadays it's milk and bacon and cheese and butter and eggs. And we had to bring in a whole lot of new products from Connecticut sources where we could, because we wanted to promote local business, fresh milk, fresh eggs, and promote business here in Connecticut. We're very much, up on taking care of our community and want to promote local freshness. So yeah, a lot of gear shifting for the home delivery from our business model that we've had in place, because hadn't done it for 28 years, but you got to make changes. You always got to, keep your eye on the ball. And when things change, you got to be ready to do so.
That's great.
Like, I love those silver boxes. That was my job when I was a kid. You'd always get the milk and everything out of there and bring it inside.
It's definitely a blast from the past. I think
It
all
is.
of us on this call are old enough to have remembered that firsthand.
Yep.
So a little bit, shifting gears a little bit here, and this is again for both of you, because you may have different resources for this, but who do you go to, or who have you gone to for inspiration, advice, and or support during all of this? I mean, and you mentioned some of your peers in the other hospitals, but are there anybody, folks outside of your let's say your own industry, who you might, you know, kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, how are you managing this, and what are you doing, and all that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, healthcare is, our involvement in the pandemic, I think, was a unique and kind of narrow operation. We spent a lot of time as the CEOs of the state talking to each other, and we did that through the Connecticut Hospital Association. Jennifer Jackson, who's the president and CEO, is just a tremendous leader, bringing us together. We spent time talking to the governor, to our state senators, and really just listening and understanding. And kudos to all of our legislators for really reaching out and asking us what they could do to help us. So, you know, communication goes both ways, and they really were listening to what the CEOs of the hospitals were talking about. And there were also national forums, particularly since New York really was a few weeks ahead of us in the wave. So, you know, I started my career in Brooklyn, New York as a hospital administrator. So reaching back out to colleagues that were in the midst of it, learning from them, so then a week or two later we could implement, you know, a better practice. And we're doing the same right now, talking to our colleagues in other states that have a high rate. But looking outside of the industry, I'd say yes to some engineering organizations that I work with. We had to do a lot of retrofitting of rooms to make them negative pressure, to put in HEPA filtration. We certainly had that in some areas, but we basically tried to install that throughout the house, and we did it in about 72 hours. So really reaching out to our engineering colleagues to say, how do you do this? I reached out to a company, Ross and Barazzini, that not only engineering, but I said, hey, I need a tent for my mobile field hospital, and they hooked me up with one of the largest party companies in the country. And it was a big white party tent that, you know, when you were inside of it in the middle of a thunderstorm, you would never know, because it had heating, ventilation, air conditioning, phone, call bells, and it was just really tremendous. We could have withstood winds of 80 miles per hour. So lots of different industries came together to help us respond to the pandemic.
That's great. Mr. Wade?
I go to a lot of industry resources, you know, the dairy companies, the egg companies. When this pandemic hit full force, there was this huge shift from food service to retail, right? And I'm sure everyone experienced a problem going into the stores, and they couldn't find eggs. They couldn't find fresh milk. And then they're seeing on the news how farmers are dumping milk, all right, because there were no resources to get it processed. And to try and understand all this so I can talk to my customers and tell them, and my own employees, what's going on in the industry. It was like the egg market. We were selling 60% of our eggs into food service. Well, these eggs come in flats, 15 dozen in a box. They're not for retail. When the retail market exploded, all right, a carton manufacturer maybe is producing at 90% capacity, but now the market wants 300% of the cartons. Nobody had cartons to put the eggs into. They had plenty of eggs, but no cartons, all right? And this has been an ongoing problem, all right? And in the milk side, you had all of this food service cheese that cheese companies just closed up because no one was buying all this food service cheese. And the processing dairy milk plants might have been at 90% of capacity. They could handle 10% more, but they couldn't handle 150% more capacity. So these farmers had nowhere to sell their raw milk. And so, I mean, just getting a handle on all of this to understand how the marketplace worked was, you know, you got to do a lot of reading, a lot of talking with other business owners to know what's going on here. So,
yeah, we had similar challenges with personal protective equipment, I mean, obviously we stock gloves, but and masks, but the burn rate of taking care of a COVID patient, was just so beyond any other type of patient that we've cared for so far. And the manufacturers were, like you said, they could go 110, 120. But thank goodness we're part of a large system because we had some leveraging power to be able to buy this. I know we certainly helped other smaller hospitals that are single standing and not affiliated because they had no way to buy this. It was just really a dire situation for us.
And you're dealing with circumstances here that are pretty much unprecedented, right? I mean, there's never really been anything like this. There have been
no playbook for this. No.
Yeah. So
in any industry, it's not just healthcare, but no industry had a playbook for this.
Yeah. And I keep in my head going back to something you said, and both of you actually have mentioned is the ability to, it's kind of like to be quick on your feet, to be creative, to think about solutions that might not initially be obvious, but it's like, oh yeah, what if we do this? How if we do that? And that, it seems to me, again, that's a hallmark of good leadership in general, is the ability to not get paralyzed, but to, to respond in the moment and realize, all right, how can you make, lemonade out of lemons here, more or less, right? So
yeah, so that was, excuse me, Doug, just
sure.
real quick. So, Ann, you mentioned the word playbook, and I was thinking about that as you folks were talking at the top of the hour. Yeah, I'm coming from an operational background in the corporate sector, and we, through Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy, the conversation around business continuity planning, and as you folks were talking, I'm like, gosh, I wonder, do the hospitals have a playbook for a pandemic? I mean, how do you plan for this, something like that? And I suspect that, because every situation is different, that there isn't a one size fits all playbook, and how do you respond to something like this?
Although you may have one in the works now, though, I'll wager, in terms of from having dealt with this, you've certainly got some things to reference going forward, right?
Absolutely. Well, part of my background, you talked about radiation safety, but also disaster preparedness and response is one of my areas of expertise. So, we took the disasters that we know, like you mentioned, hurricanes, snowstorms, power outages, etc. And we have we had an incident command structure, as all hospitals do, that ties into police, fire, EMS, state, local, federal, EMS, structures. And so we took that, and then we decided that, the best thing to do was to stick with the structure, but to change the people around to have skill sets that match this. A snowstorm or a hurricane is a finite amount of time. We're still living through COVID. It hasn't completely gone away. At one point, I was down to 0 COVID patients. I'm now up to 4 again. And so we're at 0 and 2 and 4, but they never completely go away. And the social distancing, the masks, et cetera, and all of those other precautions are still in play. So, what we decided was that the right people to prepare and execute during the disaster are different from the people in the recovery and the transformation. So that's one of the lessons that I learned from a leadership perspective. The right person in the disaster may not be the right person in recovery. And so you need to be able to maintain a flexible team for that. And then, going forward, again, being in healthcare, we always look to, the healthcare theories. And Kubler-Ross has the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I think that the healthiest and the most prosperous businesses are going to be able to get through these stages of grief or change, because change is exactly the same. And the faster you're able to go through them, the faster you're going to be able to kind of operate in the new reality with the new different types of business models. And that is going to differentiate you from your competitors.
Mr. Wade, I think you had something to add to that.
I just wanted to say that 10 years ago, we were hearing about a possible similar pandemic with the bird flu. And at that time, I had purchased 300 N95 masks, all right, which we never used, but which I managed to find down in the basement. And we gave those to Bridgeport Hospital and to St. Vincent's Hospital, just because they weren't very good for our drivers to be using, because they were difficult to breathe out of, and their purpose was much more of a surgical nature than what we needed. So you can do a little preparation for this stuff if you know that the potential is there to come out.
Doug, Ann mentioned something that I'm not sure if it would be as applicable for your business, being maybe, again, more familial and such, but did you have to repurpose anybody from one area of expertise into a different area of expertise as a result of having to shift the entire business model around?
Well, just taking a wholesale driver and putting him on home delivery service, and you know, just making sure that he was doing everything to the nines to, you know, we didn't want customers coming out, you know, wanted everything to be good out there, you know. So a little different business model, but he's done great. The customers love him, and we got an awful lot of compliments coming in from our home delivery customers. Great,
very good. All right, so you've actually touched on a few of these things here. Maybe there's a couple more specifics. So what one piece of advice would you give to fellow business owners who are struggling similarly in this? I mean, you've already offered up a bunch of things, but is there anything that really kind of sticks out that would be, hey, if you have to do anything, this would kind of be what I would recommend as a fellow business leader, owner, manager? And
yeah, so, you know, we're doing a lot of modeling. Our Office of Strategy Management is looking to the future, because I said, you know, tell me when the second wave's going to hit. And they're now talking about something called the twindemic. And the twindemic is the flu and COVID together. So we know what hospital resources look like when there's the flu. We know what it looks like with COVID. What we don't know is when you put the two together and you have a patient that has both the flu and COVID, which is possible. And so what kind of resources? So I use that as my own industry's example, but I would challenge that this isn't going away. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way business was before, you know, in February of this year. And so, you know, look to the change and look to see, you know, how you can continue to innovate, because I think the innovation and the creativity is really going to be the differentiator. And think about, if it's not COVID and if it's not the flu, there's going to be something else that is going to impact all of our businesses. And, you know, try and think through how you might fit into that niche to be able to provide that value-added service that we're not even thinking about right now.
That's great. Doug?
Just stay positive. There is a silver lining in every dark cloud. You know, you've got to be creative and, you know, do an awful lot of reading and staying on top of things, and, you know, taking care of your own physical health so that you are ready to handle any challenge that comes your way, and things will get better.
Would it be fair to say that, I mean, and everything that's been discussed so far has been kind of against the backdrop of the pandemic, of COVID and such, but Ann, you kind of touched on something that I think is worth maybe exploring a little bit more, and that's, let's presume that we will return to some semblance of good times. I don't know what that means, but let's just say that we're not going to be focusing every day on some form of disaster or another. What takeaways might be able to be applied in good times, in terms of, all right, well, how do you take a position you have and make it even better against the backdrop of relative prosperity and seamless business, things of that nature? What could be some of the things that could be good about this that could be applied to not a pandemic or not a disaster?
Yeah, so, you know, I think as a society we learned hand hygiene is important. We learned, you know, to be closer to our families. You didn't have a choice. You couldn't go out for quite a while. So, you know, I think Doug's right. The silver lining is reconnecting with those close to you, caring more and paying more attention to your general health. And I think those are good things to continue to carry on even after we go back to whatever they call the new normal now.
All right. Doug, anything you might add to that?
Well, just we have embraced our community. We did a food drive here a few weeks back that was off the charts, phenomenal. I came in at 7 o'clock. We were expecting upwards of 1,000 cars to come in, and this was the Farm to Family program. And we worked in conjunction with the workplace of Bridgeport. It was just an amazing, good feel event. We had 30 volunteers here. And there was a particular young lady that came through the food drive in a Prius. I'm very passionate about Priuses and energy efficiency and stuff. And she had a donut on the front tire, and she had 4 young kids in the car, and I just tapped on the window and I said, "Ma'am, if you need a new tire for your car, please give me a call." And she connected with me on Monday morning, and we arranged to get her some tires in the front of her car. And we've kind of taken this up as a thing for Wade's Dairy to help this young lady out, because she's in very tough times with COVID, not being able to work. And, you know, everyone in the community has got to pitch in together. And so I don't know if other companies are feeling this, but there's been a much more closeness, you know, in working in the Bridgeport community. I'm sure Ann is, because we do a food drive together at her hospital. We do something similar at St. Vincent's Hospital, and it's good that we all pitch in this together. And the BRBC has gone through some very tough times. And, you know, this is a community that has really come together in recent times, and I hope it continues.
Well, Doug, I was going to give you a shout out, but you mentioned we do the Connecticut Food Bank together, and we were really stuck because of the COVID-19 lack of resources. One phone call to Wade's Dairy, and they have been helping us out all summer. So thank you, and thank you to all your employees that come and help set up and do all that. I know it really makes a difference, and the philanthropy from Wade's and all the other businesses really has been tremendous. And, you know, my foundation is looking at things, and, you know, you don't have events, you don't have, you know, dances and rides and walks, because you're putting people together. So the philanthropy is out there. It's just, it's being cultivated in a different way than before the pandemic.
It's great, and it's a good segue into sort of the wrap-up question, and that has to do with our host entity here. And I'm going to ask both of you. You kind of touched on a few things that are certainly valuable here. What, and I'm going to say, if anything, do you feel the BRBC can provide businesses during these troubled times to help them better cope with the challenges that we're all kind of collectively dealing with right now? Dan's team has done a remarkable job. I'm not going to suggest they haven't, but anything that you can touch on that might be noteworthy or that could be even better?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd say, you know, what we're doing here is around change management training. So, you know, I have some outstanding leaders here at Bridgeport, but it's hard to manage change. And I talked about, you know, the different phases of grief. But how do you bring a whole business through a change and still maintain morale, still maintain, you know, your quality and your safety, et cetera. So if there's anything I think I would recommend to Dan is maybe some webinars around change management and how to implement that not only from a leadership team, but how does that leadership team then lead the whole company through change?
Good suggestion. I like that.
Great suggestion. Love it. Thank you, Ann.
Doug, anything there you might? piggyback on there?
Well, I've been involved with the BRBC for a good 10 years now, and I don't know that we would have been able to stay in business without my involvement in the BRBC. There are people there that are no longer there, but Jeff Bishop, tremendous guy. He hooked me up with the Department of Economic Community Development. We got a $975,000 loan that allowed us to put up a new warehouse here in Bridgeport. And I honestly, just amazing. We've done several solar energy projects, and that was with information that I got from BRBC meetings. You know, these people came in and I learned a whole lot through my involvement with the BRBC. And, you know, if I have someone coming in my office making a sales call, one of my first questions is, are you a member of the BRBC? All right, because that's how I will check your references, you know, and find out, you know, if you're everything you say you are. But I highly recommend they get involved with the BRBC. It's a wonderful organization, and I'm going to leave it at that. You can smile, Dan.
Thanks, Doug.
All good stuff.
That's great. I think the acronym that just jumped out here that actually has been sort of going on throughout this is team. Together, everybody achieves more. It's like whether it's internal, you know, with your customers, within your organizations, within an association like this, we thrive, we survive, and we thrive when we all, you know, recognize that we're part of the same team, right?
Right.
We help each other. We come to each other's aid. We try to lift up and support others. Yeah. And in the process, we benefit too. It's not, I mean, it's altruism with a positive benefit to all of us, I think.
Yeah.
Dan, do you have anything?
Say one other thing,
Sure.
if I may, Douglas.
Sure.
I'd just like to give a little shout out to Jocelyn Paoletta, who was formerly with the BRBC. And she's helped me tremendously on the home delivery project. And, you know, the people you meet there, you say, oh, she'd be perfect for this, you know, and that's another benefit of the BRBC. You know, you meet wonderful people and make a lot of good connections.
For sure. Dan, we've are there any, we might have time, I mean, you're judging this obviously, but we have time for maybe one question. Any questions from the
Well,
audience?
Ann already answered the one of them that came in, and then I think we've got them. I think we've got you asked a question on you know, what they learned through all this, and so I think we've got all the questions answered. I think we're good. That's
great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to talk to both of you. You brought some great insights, leadership insights into this. I think that if you're a business owner, I mean, forget pandemic, just in general, I think it pays dividends to be open to other ideas, to listen to how others are meeting challenges and dealing with them. I mean, some successfully, some not so successfully, but even when you have the not so successful examples, you learn from those, right? You learn, okay, well, maybe that's not the thing to do. Maybe we need to try to do this. So I think these programs, or a program like this, can be of great benefit from anybody who's on the other side of the computer screen listening and maybe taking notes and realizing that, hey, I'm not in this by myself. You know, this is good stuff. Dan, you got any closing thoughts, comments, otherwise?
Yeah, thanks. No, I just want to acknowledge again both Ann and Doug Wade for their time today. You know, I know everyone's schedule is very busy, but it's incredibly important that we get folks like yourself in front of the business community. As I said at the top of this hour, we're all very much appreciative of it. And, you know, together we do some great things. You know, I've been here just over a year now, and the community has been fantastic, the business community, as well as the folks who live and work here. You know, and as Doug mentioned earlier, you know, together we get through these challenging times, and the outpour of support and philanthropy, as Ann mentioned earlier, I think is one that should be acknowledged here in Greater Bridgeport. It's been wonderful to see and be a part of, and we'll continue to do what we do best, and that's bringing people together and trying to solve your problems, whether your business is small, no matter how small or large your business is. That's what we do, is we try to come up with creative solutions, innovative solutions, and get you in front of the right people. We may not have the answer right directly at the BRBC, but I'll tell you what, we can probably connect you with someone that does. So thanks again for everyone, your time today, especially Ann and Doug Wade. We look forward to the next session and look forward to sharing some other exciting news coming out of the BRBC and Sandler training. in the coming days as well. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the week. Okay, be well. Be safe.
Stay
Thanks,
safe. Wear your masks.
Okay.
Got it. Good advice. All right, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Good call, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.